Hi, this is Vanessa Pineda, and today I will talk about Bramante in Rome, uh, the Tempietto in San Pietro in Montorio, and the project of the new St. Peter, referring to the Basilica of St. Peter. Donato di Angelo Bramante. Bramante was born in 1444. He was an Italian architect and painter, and it's considered one of the greatest architects of the Renaissance. He actually was born in a village really near Urbino. Bramante was influenced by Filippo Brunelleschi and Leon Battista Alberti. He learned from them the art of creating harmonious and proportional spaces, and we will see this a lot in since his first works until the plans of the latest works. His most outstanding works are in Rome, like we talk about it in the subject. His first work commissioned by the Catholic monarchs of Spain was to build a church in honor of Saint Peter. Tempietto di San Pietro in Montorio is built in 1502. Then Pope Julius II hired Bramante for the construction of the largest European architectural work of the 16th century, the complete reconstruction of St. Peter's Basilica. The Tempietto in San Pietro in Montorio. One of Bramante's first work was the Tempietto in San Pietro in Montorio in Rome, a small Spanish chapel that was commissioned by King Fernando and Queen Isabel of Spain, or Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain after the take of Granada. This place is revered as the place where Saint Peter was crucified. Bramante managed to capture an architectural form, the idea of perfection. The circular building is the form that evokes the divine reality of the creation and the conceptual expression of the sacred and represented Plato's ideal city. This is an idea that we see a lot during the Renaissance, like this seek for the divine and the sacred through architecture and paint and art in general. He takes simplicity and harmony, essence of the architecture of ancient Rome, since the very beginning of his works, like we can see in this image. His architecture tends to remove decorative elements and also searches for the monumentally based on simplicity and harmony. This being really related like with Brunelleschi's kind of architecture, because he also tends to lack of elements in his architecture. Bramante also takes huge inspiration from another great master, Leon Battista Alberti, using his architectural theory. Bramante's architecture reminds me a lot of Brunelleschi's, where the care for simplicity is very noted, avoiding superfluous details, like we can see in the San Lorenzo church, or that we can see in the Duomo. And the constant search for the perfection based on mathematics and classical canons is another remarkable element, because we can see in his sketches that he cared a lot about the symmetry and the shapes and the circles and the lines and all of this. And the Tempietto in particular reminds me of the painting The Ideal City, which is attributed to Alberti. And since both masters was his inspiration, the similarities are evident. The second thing we will talk about is the project of the new St. Peter's Basilica. Pope Julius II commissioned Bramante to design the St. Peter Basilica in the Vatican after feeling disappointed by Giuliano de Sangano. The Pope named Bramante the General Superintendent of Papal Construction of St. Peter's Basilica. However, Bramante could not finish the project because he died in 1514, when just the fourth great pillar that had to support the great central dome had been built. like very early in the project. The basilica was later transformed by various architects like Giuliano de Sangano's son. Also, Michelangelo was kind of involved too, and there were various architects and artists that were later involved in this. At first, his idea started from a centralized plan in the shape of a Greek cross with the central dome, using the famous geometric figures of the Renaissance, the square and the circle. Like we talk about later, the mathematical proportion and the balance and the classical ideas of like perfection and divinity were really a thing in Renaissance, like the circle and the sphere. There were these perfect shapes that completed each other and all of that. As an initial plans, the spade had many compartments, especially at the corners of the square, covered by 5 domes, like we can see in the picture. The largest central one, supported by 4 large pillars, was an inspiration from the Basilica of San Marcos. On the other hand, the central cupola was inspired from the Pantheon of Agrippa. And also, Da Vinci used to mention that he seen various uh, like similarities between Bramante's ideas of this construction with some of the buildings that were at the time in Florence. Sadly, Bramante's work could not shine too brightly in the Basilica of St. Peter, since over time his first ideas underwent many modifications. Like later, when Michelangelo was there, he also modified a lot of the idea and they start losing it. Contrary to what some people of the time thought, because they were really mad with Bramante about destroying the previous construction that was there, and they were criticizing him a lot. Michelangelo criticized Bramante a lot, and I believe that Bramante would have created a very worthy basilica, because we can see like in this coin that was kind of a souvenir from the day they start the construction, that he had a very unique idea and a very Renaissance type of construction in his mind. I don't know if it would have been more beautiful than what we see today in the Basilica in Rome, but I'm sure that he would have not stayed behind and would have managed to do something very sublime and appropriate to the Renaissance era. So this is everything, and thank you very much for your attention.